Welcome to the Malfunction Radio, powered by God Access. I'm Genesis, your guide into the chaos of cybersecurity, pen testing, and red teaming. From hacking systems to exposing vulnerabilities, we're here to break things and build them back stronger. If it's not malfunctioning, we're not doing it right. Now, over to your hosts, Adam and Eve, for today's breakdown.
Welcome to the Deep Dive, the place where we take your stack of sources, strip away the noise, and turn information overload into immediate insight.
And today, wow, we are diving back into a classic, 2010, the origin story of Facebook, or at least Hollywood's version, The Social Network.
That's right, Jesse Eisenberg as Mark Zuckerberg, the kind of awkward genius. And that whole first act, driven by, post-breakup anger, channeled straight into coding face mash.
It's a fantastic movie, really compelling drama, ambition, betrayal, all that good stuff. But it definitely paints the face mash creation as this almost impossible digital heist, like Ocean's 11, but with code.
And that's what we're here to unpack today. We're separating the Oscar-winning legend from, let's say, the technical nuts and bolts we found in the source material.
Exactly, because the movie implies he's like cracking serious firewalls, maybe some heavy encryption.
Yeah, you picture flashing screens, complex algorithms.
But the reality, the technical hurdles were often surprisingly basic. We're talking common administrative mistakes.
So let's just get this out there right away. The core truth.
No sophisticated firewall breaches. No encryption cracked. Not for face mash, anyway.
Okay.
The real techniques. Things like exploiting something called directory indexing, which is basically finding an unlocked door, abusing search functions that weren't coded properly, and guessing really predictable passwords.
Less master hacker, more observant student noticing things weren't locked down.
That's a pretty good way to put it. He noticed the digital equivalent of the janitor leaving all the doors open.
Okay, let's really dive into this. It all starts with face mash, right? The movie sets it up. Mark, he's drunk, angry after Erica Albright dumps him.
Yeah, the film really leans into that. And his response is to build this hot or not site using photos of fellow Harvard students, kind of digital revenge, kind of showing off.
And it works, technically speaking, or at least the concept gets traction. Fast.
Oh, incredibly fast. The site goes live and bam, something like 22,000 hits in just a couple of hours, which naturally completely overwhelmed and crashed the Harvard network.
Leading to him getting into quite a bit of trouble, disciplinary action and all that.
Right. But the crucial first step for him, technically, was getting those student photos. And they weren't in one central place. They were scattered across these private databases run by each individual residential house at Harvard.
Supposedly private, supposedly controlled. That was the challenge.
Okay, so part one. How did he actually get the photos?
Right, the technical journey begins. First target, Kirkland House. And this is where the movie really lays on the drama. Fast typing, intense music.
Yeah, they make it look like he's pulling off some incredibly advanced digital break-in.
But the reality for Kirkland House was much less dramatic.
Oh, way less dramatic. It boiled down to something called Apache directory indexing. We need to understand Apache was, and still is, super common web server software. It powered a huge chunk of the internet back then.
Okay, Apache server. Directory indexing enabled. What does that actually mean in simple terms?
Think of it like this. A web server hosts files and folders, right? Directories. If you type in the URL for a directory, and there's no main page file like index.html inside it, the server has a choice. It can show an error saying nothing here, or it can automatically generate a list of everything inside that directory. All the files, all the subfolders, just laid out like a clickable table of contents.
And Kirkland House just had that switched on, accidentally.
Exactly. Someone setting as the server for the photos basically forgot to tick the box that says, don't show the contents list. It's like leaving a filing cabinet unlocked, but also taping a complete inventory list to the front.
So it wasn't hacking in the sense of breaking through security. It was finding a web address that led to this publicly available, automatically generated list.
Precisely. No login needed, no firewall bypass. The files were just sitting there listed because of configuration oversight. They assumed nobody would find the URL, which is, well, not security.
And to grab all those photos, the movie shows him doing some WGET magic. Tell me this isn't some super secret hacker tool.
No, not at all. WGET. It's a totally standard, kind of boring command line tool. Been around since like 1996.
What's it for normally?
just downloading files from the internet automatically. If you need to grab a whole bunch of files from a website without clicking on each one, use WGET. It's the internet's bulk copy-paste button, basically.
So the world-changing origin story involves copy-paste.
Pretty much. The command he types in the movie, wget-ga.jpg-hr, followed by the URL, is actually significant, though.
Okay, break that down. .ga.jpg.
That tells WGET. Only download files that end in .jpg. So, just the pictures. Ignore everything else, like web pages or scripts. Very efficient.
And the R?
That means recursive. Download everything in this directory, and if you find any subdirectories, go into those and download everything inside them, too. Keep going down the tree.
So he finds the main URL for the photo directory index.
Types that one simple command.
And WGET just goes and grabs all the JPEGs from all the folders automatically.
Yeah, you can basically just hit enter and walk away. The tool does all the tedious clicking and downloading. The hack was noticing the indexing was on and knowing the right standard tool to exploit that laziness efficiently. Took seconds to start.
Wow. Okay, so Kirkland House was basically an open book. What about the next one, Elliott House?
Right. Elliott presented a slightly different challenge. It was also unsecured, no login needed.
Not.
But the admins there had remembered to turn off Apache directory indexing. So the filing cabinet was still unlocked, but the inventory list wasn't taped to the front anymore.
Okay, so he couldn't just use WGET on a directory listing? How did he get the list of photos then?
He found a different kind of mistake. This time, it was in the website's own photo search function. A classic developer oversight.
What kind of oversight?
They didn't properly handle what happens when you submit an empty search. You go to the search box, type nothing, and hit search.
Right. Normally it should probably say, please enter a name or just do nothing.
Exactly. But the way the Elliott House site was built, an empty search query was interpreted by the database as, show me everything, like a wildcard search for funny.
You're kidding. So hitting search with no name just dumped the entire photo database onto one single web page.
Pretty much. All the student photos just loaded onto one massive page in the browser. A huge coding blunder.
Okay. This leads to what might be the most relatable hack in the whole story. No WGT needed this time.
Nope. This time he used a built-in browser feature. Something literally anyone can do. Go to the menu, File, then Save Page X.
And choose Web Page Complete. Or just hit Stray-All plus S.
That's the one. When you do that, your browser, Firefox, in his case, is designed to download the HTML of the page itself and every single image embedded on that page.
And it saves them all neatly in a folder for you.
Exactly. All the photos from that massive search results page downloaded and organized automatically by the browser itself.
So he hacked Elliott House by using the save button, the same way my grandma saves a recipe online.
Functionally, yes. It wasn't really overcoming a security barrier. It was just using the browser's normal function in a clever way to grab data that was, again, basically public, but just not obviously listed.
It really highlights that the security was just based on hoping nobody found the right page or tried the wrong thing. Obscurity, not actual protection.
Precisely. If you stumble onto the page, the data is yours for the taking.
Okay, this is fascinatingly low-tech so far. But then we get to Lowell House. This one sounds different. They actually had a login, username and password required.
Yes. Lowell House added a layer. You need credentials to see the student photos. Now he actually had to bypass something that looked like security.
And this is where it gets interesting organizationally, right? You mentioned the login system wasn't standard Harvard issue.
Crucial point. Mark figured out, or maybe just knew, that the Lowell House login was homemade. It was completely separate from the main Harvard FAS central authentication system.
Okay, so if it's not connected to the main system, what does that imply?
Two big things. First, it probably wasn't being monitored by central IT for things like multiple failed login attempts that we call brute forcing, no automatic lockouts.
Makes sense. And
Second, because it wasn't linked to the central system, they couldn't easily use the students' main Harvard passwords. That would be a huge security no-no, asking students for their primary password for some small, isolated house website.
So the Lowell webmaster needed a different credential, one they already had access to for all the Lowell students.
Exactly. Mark had to think like the webmaster. What unique piece of information does the house administration have for every student that could be used as a simple, predictable password?
And he landed on the student ID number.
Bingo. It's unique to each student. The house admins would definitely have it on their rosters, and it's predictable. It's a classic case of exploiting predictable or default credentials. like when systems used to ship with admin as the username and password as the password.
So he just tried a student's username and their student ID number as the password.
And it worked. He didn't need to crack anything complex. He just made a logical deduction about the easiest, laziest way they might have set up their non-standard login system. It was about understanding the likely human shortcut, not the technology.
So the hack was really a successful guess based on probable bad practice.
That's it. The technical part was trivial, just entering the guessed password. The clever part was the reasoning behind the guess.
Okay, but getting in was only the first step for Lowell. He still needed to get the photos out, and apparently it wasn't as simple as Eliot House's single page.
Right. Once inside, he found the photos were spread across lots and lots of different pages, maybe listed alphabetically or by year or whatever. Clicking through and saving each page manually, or even using Ctrl+S repeatedly, would take forever. Too inefficient.
So this is where the coding comes back in, the Perl script.
This is exactly where the Perl script becomes necessary. He moves from just finding open doors and clicking save to automating a more complex, repetitive task. Systemization.
Perl sounds intimidating, but what was it actually doing?
He used some very standard Perl libraries, basically pre-written code modules that handle common tasks. Things like LWP user agent, which acts like a web browser in code. It can fetch pages, submit forms, handle logins.
Okay, so it could automate the login using the username and student ID password.
Yep. And then another module like HTML tree builder, which is designed to read the structure of a web page, the HTML code.
So the script would log in, then maybe figure out how the pages were numbered or linked.
Exactly. It would parse the first page to find the link to the next page, or figure out the pattern, like page 1, page 2, page 3, and then loop through all of them.
And on each page?
On each page, it would probably just run the reget command again to grab the images listed there. Or maybe parse the image links directly. The point is, it automated the whole process. Log in, navigate through dozens or hundreds of pages, download photos from each.
So the script itself wasn't some groundbreaking exploit. It was just efficient laziness, writing code to avoid thousands of clicks.
Precisely. It was an efficiency hack, not a security penetration hack. It was necessary because the manual methods were just too slow for the sheer volume of photos he wanted for Face Mesh.
And this process of refining the script continued with the other houses he targeted.
Yeah, the sources mention a couple more examples that show this evolution. Adam's house, for instance. Apparently it had no login, but the search results were limited to only 20 photos per page.
Ah, pagination. So similar to Lowell, but without the login hassle.
Right. He just needed to tweak his Perl script to understand that pagination, to click through page 1, page 2, page 3, and so on, running WGET on each small batch of results.
And then Leverett House, another twist.
Leverett was slightly different again. It allowed the empty search, like Eliot House, which was convenient. But instead of showing all the images directly on the results page, it only showed links to individual student profile pages, with maybe one image per page.
Okay, that's less efficient for scraping. You can't just Ctrl+S the results page.
Exactly. This is where the movie has that line about him needing to break out Emacs and modify that Perl script.
Emacs, the text editor. Sounds intense, but really he was just editing his code again.
Pretty much. He needed to add logic to his Perl script. Instead of just downloading images from the search results page, the script now had to 1. Fetch the results page. 2. Parse the HTML to find all those individual profile page links. 3. Then visit each of those profile pages one by one. 4. And then find and download the image link from each individual profile page.
So more complex parsing, using things like regular expressions, maybe.
Almost certainly.
Yeah.
Using regex to extract those specific profile URLs from the search page, then probably more regex or HTML parsing to find the image URL on the profile page. It's definitely a step up in complexity, but still well within the realm of standard web scraping, not elite hacking. He was just refining his automated data collection tool.
And importantly, there was one house he didn't manage to scrape, Dunster House. Why skip that one?
That detail is actually really revealing. According to the sources, he skipped Dunster for 2 main reasons, both highlighting the practical limits of his approach at the time.
Okay, what were they?
First, the search results limit was apparently even more restrictive than Adam's house. Maybe only 5 or 10 results per page, making automated scraping painfully slow and inefficient.
Just too tedious, even for the script.
Yeah. And the second, more technical blocker, was how the images themselves were linked, instead of a direct link to a .jpg file.
Yeah.
The links apparently went through some kind of PHP script first, like viewimage.php.id123.
Ah, okay. So the link doesn't point to the image. It points to a script that serves the image. Why is that harder to scrape?
Because your simple WGET command, or even a basic Perl script, expects a direct file link. When it hits a script, that script might be doing other things, checking permissions, logging the request, resizing the image dynamically. It adds a layer of unpredictability.
So downloading it automatically becomes much harder. You'd need to interact with the PHP script in a more sophisticated way, maybe figure out what parameters it needs.
Exactly. It would likely require more complex coding, maybe handling cookies or sessions, or reverse engineering what the PHP script expected. It wasn't impossible, but it crossed a threshold.
From easy configuration exploit to actual programming challenge.
Right. And Mark, being pragmatic and needing speed, seemingly decided, you know what? Not worth the effort for this one house. He cut his losses and moved on.
That decision really paints a different picture than the movie's unstoppable code god narrative. He was optimizing his time, tackling the low-hanging fruit first.
Absolutely. The whole face mash data acquisition story, when you break it down, is less about breaching fortresses and more about systematically exploiting a series of basic security blunders and configuration errors across Harvard's decentralized IT. Unlocked doors, faulty search forms, guessable passwords, and easily scrapable sites.
The genius was perhaps less in the code and more in the rapid recognition and exploitation of these widespread, simple weaknesses.
Okay, now let's shift gears completely. Fast forward, Facebook is growing there in Palo Alto, and we get that famous intern interview scene.
Right, the chaotic, alcohol-fueled coding challenge. If Face Mash was about exploiting Harvard's, let's be frank, laziness, this scene feels like the polar opposite. It's testing serious, aggressive hacking skills.
It really is. It shows a massive evolution in Mark's understanding, or at least appreciation, of real cybersecurity challenges. This scenario isn't about finding open doors. It's about simulating a determined attacker breaking into a system designed to keep them out.
So, unlike the Face Mash part, this scenario is actually technically plausible, like a real penetration test.
Oh yeah, the objectives laid out are absolutely realistic for a high-level security assessment or pen test. The candidates have, what, 10 minutes?
To achieve some seriously complex goals.
Let's list them. They needed to get root access full admin control on a Python web server.
Right. Then expose the server's SSL encryption, which basically means finding a way to read the secure traffic.
Then intercept traffic over the secure port 443.
And finally, bypass a simulated PIX firewall emulator. That's a Cisco firewall. It's a hell of a checklist for 10 minutes, especially with the drinking game rules designed to mess you up.
Exactly. The rules themselves are interesting. Penalizing long code rewards efficiency. Getting detected costs you a shot. Testing stealth. The random pop-up click tests multitasking under pressure. And everyone drinks every 3 minutes anyway, guaranteeing impairment. It's engineered chaos.
Okay, so the goals are realistic, but the movie just shows frantic typing. What would the actual steps look like to achieve this? Let's start with getting that initial foothold. Remote code execution, RCE.
Okay, step one in any real attack is recon. You'd run Nmap, the network scanner.
What would that tell you?
It might reveal, say, a Python web server running on an unusual port, like 8000. Maybe browsing there shows a feature like a secure data processor, often a file upload function, and maybe a debug page left active.
And the vulnerability lies in that file upload. The sources mention Python pickle files. What are those?
So, pickle is Python's way of doing serialization. Imagine you have a complex piece of data in your program, like a user's settings, or the state of a game. Serialization, using pickle, turns that complex data structure into a flat string of bytes that you can save to a file or send over a network.
Okay, like saving your progress.
Exactly. And later, you can deserialize that pickle file, read the bytes back in, and perfectly reconstruct the original complex data structure in memory.
So the server here is expecting a pickle file containing some kind of legitimate data to process.
Right. But the vulnerability is what's called unsafe deserialization. It turns out the pickle format itself has some dangerous features if used carelessly, specifically something called the reduce method.
Okay, reduce. What does that let an attacker do? Sounds ominous.
It basically allows the person creating the pickle file to embed instructions on how the object should be rebuilt during deserialization. And crucially, these instructions can tell the deserializer to run arbitrary code.
Wait, so you can craft a data file that when the server simply tries to read it, it actually executes commands.
That's the exploit. The attacker doesn't send code in the traditional sense. They send a specially crafted pickle file, shell.tkl maybe. When the vulnerable Python application on the server tries to unpickle this file to get the data out, the malicious reduce method inside hijacks the process and tells the server, hey, instead of rebuilding data, run this command. Usually it's a command to open up a connection back to the attacker's machine.
Reverse shell, giving them initial access?
Exactly. Give them a command prompt on the server running as whatever user the web application runs as.
Yeah.
Usually not root, just a low-privilege user. But they're in.
Okay, that is leagues more complex than finding an open directory. But they're not root yet. Objective 2 was privilege escalation to root. How do they jump from low-level user to full admin?
This is a classic next step. Once you have that initial shell, you start looking for ways to elevate your privileges. One of the most common techniques is searching for SU binaries.
SU ID. Set user ID. Remind me what that is again.
So on Linux or Unix systems, files can have special permission bits. The SUID means that when any user runs that program, the program executes with the permissions of the file's owner, not the user running it.
And why would you ever want that normally?
The classic example is the password command for changing your password. You, as a normal user, need to run it, but the command itself needs to write to the etc shadow file, which is owned by root and highly protected.
Ah, so passroots runs as root temporarily, even though you started it.
Exactly. It inherits root's privileges just for that specific task.
But if an attacker finds a different program that's mistakenly set SUID root, and that program has a vulnerability,
Then they can exploit that vulnerability to run their own commands with root privileges.
Yeah.
The attacker would use the find command on the compromised server to search the entire file system for files that have this SUID bit set and are owned by root.
And sometimes they find unusual or misconfigured ones. The source mentions sudo-find.
Yeah, finding the standard find command itself, set SUID root, is actually a known critical vulnerability. There are public databases, like GTFOBins, that list commands you can run with the SUID find to get a root shell.
Like a cheat sheet for privilege escalation?
Pretty much. The attacker would likely run a command like teamsuidfind -exec bin bash - quit. The find command executes bin bash, a shell, and the crucial UP flag tells bash to keep the effective root privileges it inherited from the SUI2 find.
And boom, instant root shell, no password needed.
Instant root. Objective 2 achieved.
Okay, they have root. Now for the really tricky part. Objective 3, intercepting and exposing SSL encryption on port 443. Root access doesn't automatically let you read encrypted traffic, does it?
No, not directly. If you use a tool like TCP dump as root to sniff network traffic, you'll see the raw packets. For unencrypted HTTP on port 80, you'll see plain text.
But for HTTPS on port 443, it's all encrypted with TLS SSL. Just looks like random garbage data.
Right. To actually decrypt that traffic and see the contents, the expose SSL encryption part, you need the server's secret keys.
So step 1 is finding those keys. How do you do that, even as root?
It's a multi-stage process. First, you'd search the file system for the SSL private key files. Common spots are etc private or in the web server's configuration directories.
But what if the key isn't stored in a file, or only loaded into memory when the server starts?
That's often the case for better security. So the next, much more advanced step is memory scraping. Using a debugger tool like GDB, GNU Debugger, the attacker attaches to the running web server process, like Apache or an Nginx or Python.
And just dumps its memory.
Essentially, yes. They carefully dump the memory space of that process. Then they analyze that memory dump offline, searching for the patterns that match SSL session keys, the temporary keys used for active connections. It's delicate, complex work.
Oh, okay, so they've managed to extract the private key file or the session keys from memory. What now? How do they use them to read the traffic?
Now they combine the keys with the captured traffic. They'd start a packet capture using TCP dump again, saving all the encrypted 443 traffic to a file. Crucially, they'd also configure their environment to log those session keys they extracted, using something like the SSL keylog file variable.
And the final step.
They use a powerful network analysis tool like T-Shark, the command line version of Wireshark. You feed T-Shark the packet capture file and the file containing the harvested SSL keys.
And T-Shark can use the keys too.
To decrypt the TLS traffic on the fly, reconstructing the original unencrypted HTTP requests and responses hidden inside the secure tunnel, you finally get human-readable output. Objective achieved.
That is incredibly involved. Dumping memory, key extraction, specialized decryption tools, a world away from typing redget.
Absolutely. And there was one more objective mentioned, bypassing the simulated PIX firewall emulator.
Right, the PIX was a real Cisco firewall back in the day. What's the challenge here once you already have root on a server behind the firewall?
Well, the firewall isn't just about keeping attackers out. It's also about segmentation, controlling traffic between internal servers, or between the internal network and the outside world, like the attacker's command and control server. Just because you rooted one box doesn't mean the firewall will let that box talk freely to anywhere else.
Okay, so how might an attacker bypass those internal firewall rules?
Again, reconnaissance is key, but this time internal recon. From the compromised server, they look for ways the server itself interacts with other network devices. A common weak point, especially in older or simulated environments, is SNMP Simple Network Management Protocol.
SNMP, that's used for monitoring network devices, right?
Exactly. Servers often have SNMP configured to allow monitoring tools or firewalls to query their status. The attacker would look for SNMP configuration files on the rooted server, hoping to find the community strengths.
Which are like passwords for SNMP.
Pretty much. And often, especially historically, these were left at default values like public, read-only, or private, read-write. Very insecure.
So if they find a wicked SNMP string on the server,
they might be able to use it to query the PIX firewall itself from the compromised server. SNMP could potentially let them download the firewall's configuration, including his rule set.
So they learn the firewall's rules from the inside.
Exactly. They might discover, for instance, that while the firewall blocks most outgoing connections, it allows traffic on some obscure high port number, maybe used for a specific internal management or logging tool.
And then they just use that allowed port.
Precisely. They could then tunnel their malicious traffic, like their reverse shell communication, over that unusual permitted port. They're not breaking the firewall rules, they're finding a pre-existing hole or exception in the rules, often related to poorly secured internal management protocols like SNMP. It's exploiting misconfiguration again, but at the network infrastructure level.
Tunneling through an allowed obscure port, that makes sense.
It's a common technique for bypassing egress filtering once you have an internal foothold.
Okay, putting it all together. The intern challenge involves network scanning, exploiting unsafe deserialization for RCE, finding SUI binaries for privilege escalation, dumping process memory to extract SSL keys, decrypting TLS traffic with specialized tools, and potentially using SNMP weaknesses to map and bypass firewall rules.
Yeah. When you compare that whole chain to the movie's quick cuts and keyboard mashing,
it's night and day. The movie captures the goals of a sophisticated hack, but completely glosses over the immense multi-layered complexity and actual techniques required.
it really highlights the difference between Mark's early face mash exploits, which, as we saw, were more about cleverly exploiting basic setup errors and the kind of real-world professional penetration testing skills that Facebook would later need to hire for and defend against. His own evolution mirrored the evolution of the threats. Hashtag tech outro.
So, wrapping this up, what's the big picture here regarding the social network and its portrayal of hacking?
Well, we've seen two very different narratives, haven't we? The face mash origin story, the foundation myth. It was really built on exploiting some surprisingly simple security mistakes. Just basic negligence, really.
Institutional carelessness, yeah.
Yeah.
Unlocked directories, bad search code, passwords that were basically public knowledge if you thought about it for a second.
But that you contrast that with the intern interview scene. That scenario, while dramatized, reflects actual complex multi-stage hacking techniques, real penetration testing.
So the main takeaway isn't necessarily that the movie lied, but that it conflated two very different kinds of technical activity. It made the simple stuff look hard and then accurately depicted the goals of hard stuff, but without showing the actual hard work.
I think that's fair. It created this myth of Zuckerberg as this lone genius cracking impossible systems from day one for face mash. The reality was more about him being observant and pragmatic and exploiting easily available low-hanging fruit. His genius wasn't in inventing exploits, but in seeing the opportunity in others' mistakes and systemizing the data collection.
And the intern scene shows that later on, the company absolutely understood and needed people capable of the real complex stuff. Defending against the kind of attacks they simulated requires deep technical expertise.
Right. The skills tested in that interview, RCE, privilege escalation, memory analysis, SSL decryption, firewall bypass, that's the bread and butter of modern offensive and defensive security.
Which brings us to maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to chew on.
Yeah, think about the tools Mark actually used for face mash. We talked about WGET, the standard download utility, the Control plus S Save As feature built into every browser, some pretty basic Perl scripts using standard libraries.
These aren't specialized hacking tools. They're just tools for automation, for interacting with the web.
Exactly. And one of the most valuable companies in the world got its initial controversial kickstart by using these everyday tools to exploit common sense security failures. Lazy configurations, predictable passwords, accidentally exposed files.
So the provocative question is this. If Facebook's origin story, at least the face mash part, relied so heavily on these simple, widespread vulnerabilities back then, how many other systems that you interact with today might still be vulnerable to similarly basic issues?
Think about your local government website, maybe your university student portal, that new app from a small startup. Are they truly secure? Or are they just relying on the fact that nobody's bothered to check if they left the digital equivalent of the filing cabinet unlocked? Are they confusing obscurity with actual security?
Something to consider. Keep your own digital directories secured. Question assumptions about security through obscurity.
And remember, sometimes the most impactful hack isn't about complex code, but just noticing the obvious vulnerability that everyone else missed.
That's our deep dive for today. Thanks for joining us.
We'll catch you on the next one.
Thank you for tuning into the Malfunction Radio powered by God Access. That was a great breakdown from Adam and Eve. It's been a pleasure guiding you through today's deep dive into the world of cybersecurity and red teaming. Remember, if it's not malfunctioning, we're not doing it right. Stay curious, stay secure, and we'll catch you in the next episode. Bye!